I have, in an incredibly short amount of time, become absolutely obsessed with Naoki Urasawa. One thing that stood out to me throughout reading his work Pluto and 20th Century Boys is how adept Urasawa is at handling the pacing of dialogue. It's incredibly natural, relying on broken up panels to pace it and keep in time and rhythm with the visuals. So in this episode, I'm going to take a few examples from early on in Pluto and look at how Urasawa tackles them and what it says about the form of comics and the language of the medium. You're watching Strip Pal Naked, I'm Hass, and I'm going to show you some of the cool stuff lurking in the pages of some of the best comics. So I've taken one page, this is just early on, just a random choice essentially from the first collection of Pluto by Urasawa. The first thing you'll notice is the amount of panels on this first page, right, from the first chapter of the series. Manga pages in physical dimensions are smaller than American comics and direct market comics, and yet this is a denser page than you'll often find, with a whopping 8 panels. We've talked on Strip Panel Naked before about balancing, more or less panels to control pacing, but I think this is an interesting application, specifically around the handling of dialogue. Comics as a medium has a temporal problem. Again, we've discussed this on Strip Panel Naked too, where in any panel you're likely to find two elements that are running at different speeds. One is the image, obviously, and the other is of course the text. Sometimes this doesn't matter, right? Like the Astro City example from earlier in the year, where we discussed how the narration captions can run at different speeds entirely from the images that are contained within, because they're essentially outside the world presented in the image, they're operating in a kind of different space. However, when there is diegetic sound, as in the case of dialogue attributed to a speaker who's in the image, you suddenly have one thing that moves constantly, which is the dialogue, and one thing that is static in the image. What I mean by this is that the dialogue is always moving because it's kind of revealing itself. You can't take in everything that someone is saying at a glance, in the same way that you can kind of take in an image just by quickly looking at it. Often comics get around this by presenting the visual as the final moment in the time as it relates to the text. So whatever a character says in a panel, the action we see in the visual will correspond to the final sort of emotional point of that dialogue. And this is a good fix, but it is a kind of fix and solution to a problem often created by having dialogue that outpaces an image. For example, let's imagine a sequence from this page in Pluto, but it will include a little bit more dialogue and create two separate back and forths. Now in this instance, and apologies for my terrible writing, the reactions can only capture one moment, right? For example, the balloon that says, "That's a great idea, I wonder where he is now," can't really hold the same moment as, "Okay, I'm leaving now." Those two things are separate, yet the panel is only able to show the characters reacting to one of those statements. So in this case, for example, it would be the final moment of them trying to leave. This is not a particularly great example of dialogue, but it shows you how when you add more than one inflection point, action, or emotional beat in the dialogue of any one panel, the text is naturally going to outpace the image, placing the final emotional beat as the reaction on the face is one workaround, but it means that the image will never be able to keep up with the text. What Urasawa does for this dialogue instead is frequently have no more than 2 balloons in any panel, and split up the dialogue as much as possible, so that only one emotional beat is taking place in any one panel. So for example, if you look at panels 2 and 3 on this page, they have 1 balloon each, attributed here to the character Gesicht. The first has him responding, "I did," before punching in closer, so that we can read and attribute this reaction very specifically to this moment of him saying that the robot Mont Blanc was torn to pieces. Suddenly that reaction becomes incredibly important, just as important as the words next to it, because it maintains pace of that dialogue, and those two elements exist within the same sort of time frame. It also puts more emphasis on that reaction because of the way it's broken up. It means that that reaction is really important for you to read. You could easily add "I did" into the same panel, for example, but it doesn't reframe the text against a new reaction or emotion or image. And splitting those emotional beats up into new balloons is a really good way of breaking the rhythm, and something I often do as a letterer, but it still relies specifically on its own prose value rather than in contrast or support of the image next to it. So here the "I did" sits separately, and it takes power away from the second part of the balloon because it isn't given its own moment to be read against. And the other part of this is that we get constant progression as well, right? If we consider time to be that of the length of a panel, the more dialogue within one will slow down and extend that time, no matter how quick the visuals taking place within it are. For example, if you've got a panel of a character kind of doing a big fast action kick, but they've got 2 or 3 balloons of dialogue, that panel, no matter how fast the action contained is, will be a slower read. So if we take a look again at this mock-up example from earlier, this panel takes time before we progress to a new moment, as in a new panel with a new image. It means that everything gets slower if panels contain numerous back and forths, rather than one bit of dialogue per character. Again, it outpaces the image, giving the image less value across the page than the text. And this page here with 8 panels reads quicker than if you took the exact same dialogue but you only placed it within, say, 4 panels. And that's because we get that sense of movement and progression with every new visual. We are rarely stuck in just one moment in time, which is therefore meaning that we're into the next moment of time, right? And then the next moment of time, and then the next moment of time. This approach to really digging down and separating conversations creates a very, very particular and specific rhythm, but one that has a steady pace of just moving forward. Then there's the silence we get too. Almost every dialogue sequence throughout Pluto has one or two of these moments where the dialogue just stops and characters are allowed to react in silence to what's just been said, or what's not been said. And the reason this works, beyond Urasawa's obviously wonderful acting he imbues his characters with, is that the reactions within the dialogue and the acting more generally is actually given a lot of importance, specifically because of what we've just been discussing around the temporal aspects of the panels. When the dialogue never outpaces the visuals, it means that the acting within any panel, dialogue or no dialogue, is incredibly relevant to the words the character is saying. When you have dialogue that outpaces the visuals, it becomes less so because the reactions may only be consistent with the final balloon or the final bit of dialogue. So naturally, the text is the main focus and the image is helping support it. When you are running more concurrently, both end up supporting each other. The acting can imbue the dialogue with emotion, and the dialogue helps reinforce the emotion of the visual. The two working in tandem gives them a particular strength. So when we get to these moments of silence, they aren't just pauses in the dialogue or a small beat or break, but they're actually still important writing. That set of 2 reactions there between Gesicht and his wife Helena have to be read because of how important the acting is in every other instance, and they do read really well. Helena's turning away, hand to her mouth, Gesicht noticing the phone buzzing, and both being placed next to each other, looking in opposite directions. There's a sort of lack of connection caused by Gesicht's work, causing a space between them. It's wonderful, it's subtle, but it's rendered important because of the pacing of the rest. And really this is applicable across almost every single dialogue sequence in Pluto. There's an example here from another moment in the first volume, again just picking something at random, and following a rule of no more than 2 balloons per panel, dense page again of 8 panels. The hallmarks are there, the silence, the emphasis on reaction and emotions and acting in the faces to add some inference to the dialogue next to them. For example, there's the 5th panel there of Gesicht looking down and away. There's a sadness in his eyes and his face as he says, well, I'll be on my way. All of this points to me to an incredibly interesting way of handling dialogue in comics, and aiming to match the timing of the words against the timing of the images, to create scenes that feel like the images are constantly being reframed, and therefore constantly working alongside the text we see to infer context and emotion. So much of this is reliant on form and format, of course, page counts, release schedules, as well as approaches to stories in manga that can be different as opposed to other regions. But the cursory examination into Urasawa's approaches to characters conversing with each other reveals genuinely a master of acting at work, realizing that not just dialogue or reactions are important, but rather the parallel existence of both within a controlled, defined timing structure is what will make these interpersonal moments really, really sing. If you're looking to understand how comics can handle something that we often attribute to the strengths of live-action film and television, Urasawa's work in Pluto is absolutely the perfect starting point. Thanks for watching. Just like to say thank you to all the patrons that I have on Patreon, and if you want to support the channel and kind of get a lot more extra essays and analysis from me, there's literally about 4 years worth of that at the moment on the Patreon page, which is patreon.com/strippanelnaked. You also, if you're a patron, get discounts for panel by panel. If you're a top tier patron, you get a free issue of that every single month. So if you want to support the magazine and also support the work that I do here on Strip Panel Naked, you can do that straight from the Patreon page. You can find the magazine separately if you're interested at panelxpanel.com. If you like the kind of stuff we talk about on Strip Panel Naked, then you will absolutely adore the magazine. I suggest you go check it out. You can find me on Twitter also at HassanOE if you want to listen to more of my ramblings. And finally, hit subscribe and the notification bell to keep up to date with all the latest episodes, and I will see you next time.